So, Ron, I am very pleased to be interviewing you about your fabulous new novel, Missile Paradise.
Thank you.
I think place is really, really important to you. And I was thinking about how a lot of the fiction writers that I most admire are those for whom place really exerts the same power as character. Missile Paradise would not be the novel it is if not for its locale, which is the Marshall Islands. But it has a very complicated history and society. And so, could you just talk about how you went to the Marshall Islands and how the Marshall Islands worked their way into your fiction?
I spent time there as a kid. For 2 years, I lived there. I lived there on the missile base. My father was an electrical engineer, part of this elite corps of civilians who were doing missile research for the Army, the U.S. Army. And so I spent 2 formative years on this little missile base, 3 miles long, a quarter mile wide, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, watching missiles go up into the tropical sky and seeing the Marshallese on other islands. They weren't allowed to live on our island, our missile base. They weren't allowed to be there after dark. And it affected me. It touched me in a way. I said, these are interesting people. This is a strange place. What's going on here? I was troubled. There were some contradictions. The Marshallese are on this island that was called the Calcutta of the Pacific. It was so poor and so crowded. I think the short answer to that question is the place has haunted me for years. And I had to find some way to make sense of it in my life as an American and make sense of it as a political being, as somebody who cares about the world and what happens in the world.
There seem to be, and I can tell from the novel, so many different social kind of strata there. There are transients, there are people who are sort of native to the islands, there are Americans who have jobs there are military people, there are scholars studying things. I suppose there are a lot of scientists. Can you just talk about the relationship between the Marshall Islands and the United States?
Now, what people don't understand about the Marshall Islands is that it is the nexus of change in the world. There's so much that happened there. Americans tested their nuclear bombs in the 1950s there, 67 tests over approximately 10 years' time. The Marshallese just had no idea what was happening to them. And Americans didn't even know. Most Americans didn't even know what was going on out there. Everyone's heard of the Bikini Island detonation, and that's where we got the bikini and all that stuff from. But no one in America really understood what was happening here. We were their keepers for years, for 40-some years after World War II.
After World War II.
Yeah, they were trust territory. The contention on the part of many Marshallese is that we were, imperialist possessors of the land, and we were. They wanted their independence decade after decade. And so not until 1979 did they gain their independence. They finally got it.
Let's talk about your story.
Yes, my story.
Paradise, which, by the way, is my favorite kinds of novels are jam-packed with characters involved in all sorts of sticky situations where I'm greatly entertained and amused, but there's also a very strong backbone of a lot at stake. And I love the way the book begins, and I'd really love you to talk about that, because Cooper, this wonderful protagonist who we're introduced to, and I always say that the way I start a novel is with a main character in a predicament. Well, Cooper is in quite a predicament, and in a way, it's almost like a modern shipwreck that the story starts with. So you want to talk about the beginning of the novel and how you launch us into this place and this set of characters?
Yeah, that first chapter with Cooper arriving at the islands on his sailboat, I really like that place to start because Cooper is a stranger in a strange land. He's not seen the Marshall Islands, and in fact, most Americans just don't know the Marshall Islands exist. So Cooper is like one of those people, and so he comes to the Marshall Islands like a dreamer on his sailboat, thinking everything's going to be lovely and gorgeous, and yet he's finding all these strange things. He's finding the kids are listening to rap and hip-hop, and they're dressed like American teenagers, but they're eating raw fish on rice for breakfast and then maybe Twinkies for lunch. And he comes to this little island because he's off course and he's injured now because he made a grave mistake, and his leg is now going gangrenous, and he's just totally out of sync. So Cooper just represents the quintessential American who's kind of guileless, kind of just wide open eyes and not sure about, the reality of the world.
So how do you describe the book? If somebody asks you to describe the book in a few sentences, and by the way, I always fail at this with my own books, but maybe you're better than I am.
I'm not better than this.
Pitch, Ron.
Yeah, I am not better. This is a really hard book to describe because it's very expansive. There's a lot of stuff going on here. It's about Americans pursuing the American dream in all the wrong ways. In some ways, it's not easy to be an American. We're kind of bunglers because we have such wide eyes about, what's possible. And we haven't been corrected in the same way that other cultures have been corrected. And I think that accounts for our incredible dismay and disillusionment in the last 20 years, now that we're targets of terrorism. We just haven't known what to make of that.
Looking at Missile Paradise myself, I think one of the things that's so rich about it is, first of all, it's an extraordinary portrait of a place. And sometimes you can read a book and it takes you somewhere that no other author has taken you before. I mean, I have never read anything else or no other fiction that takes place in the Marshall Islands. And but it's also, it is a boisterous fable, satire about the place of America in the world today, and how we've gotten to that place today. And it's also just a book about a group of characters that I just got really involved with. So maybe we could talk about second chances. You've got to tell the story about the frat house that you bought in Baltimore, which was, talk about a place that had been ruined, that from pictures I saw in your wonderful book, and maybe you'll talk a little bit about the book you wrote about the experience of giving that house a second chance, and then about how you've arrived on this farm that you're now living on.
Yes, when we found it 15 years ago, it was a wrecked fraternity. It was essentially condemned property. It had sat on the market unsold for about a year. Nobody would touch it. And Jill and I love old houses. We saw the house. We said, this is our dream house. And we spent the next 15 years bringing it back to its original glory. And we did a great job. It was a lot of fun. We learned a ton of stuff. And at the end of those 15 years, we decided we wanted another project. So we bought a historic farm. And that's where I am right now. In the barn. We're not yet in the house because the house is a wreck, but we're going to bring everything back, all the old buildings and the property, and we've been working on it for about 4 months now. Yes, second chances. I'm a big believer in that. It is a central theme in the book because a lot of people give up too easily. And one of the things that I'm determined to assert wherever I go is don't give up. Just don't.
That is a lesson in your life, I have to say. So, but you have to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel, and because people can actually not only see what you've done and all the things you learn to do, but learn how to do them themselves if they're as foolish as you are.
We do have a YouTube channel. It's all about do-it-yourself stuff. If you Google my name or House Love, you might find it. There's a
website, houselove.org.
Yeah, houselove.org. It's just a whole bunch of fun making these videos and showing people what we've done and actually teaching them the tricks that we've learned along the way.
So what's the biggest surprise you've encountered at the farm? Good or bad?
Oh, the snakes. Yeah, we got lots of snakes.
Inside or outside?
Oh, both. We had no idea there'd be this many snakes. There are a lot of snakes here.
Rats, right?
Yes, they eat the mice. That's why they're here. The biggest snake we've seen is about 6 foot, and Jill stepped on that. She thought it was a pipe, and then it reared its head up, and she screamed. And she's a little nervous now about the snakes, but they're great to have around. They go after the mice, and we're closing them out of the house, but we're finding snake skins all over the house.
And one more thing you have to talk about. You have to talk about the Green Camper Van. Your book tours, because
that's right.
I have to tell you that it's like the grooviest mobile home I've ever seen. RV, I suppose they're supposed to be called.
Yeah, I created that vehicle to promote From Animal House to Our House It's part of my whole DIY thing, so I took this old cargo van, gutted it, outfitted it to the nines with solar panels on the roof and totally self-contained, and it's really cool. And that's what I travel in now when I do a book tour. So the book tour coming up, I'm going to be in that van going, I don't know where, but...
well, not to the Marshall Islands. So is there anything else you wanted to say about Missile Paradise? Like, when's it being published?
It's supposed to be out in the spring. May 1st is the official date for me. That's when I start going on the road and doing all the tour stuff. So this summer is going to be busy. That'll be a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
All right, Ron. Good luck with the snakes.
Thank you. I love the snakes. Take care.
Bye.